Your daily dose of dopamine. I'm Susan. That guy's Robert. And I have been thinking about something today.
Please, please.
I know this is unscripted, and one might accuse me of planning
Ah,
this question, but it actually is something that we've never talked about here on the Daily Dose, and it's
okay.
a big deal. And it's kind of your story. I've been, I guess, looking through old. Oh, I know what started it. Oh yeah, I was trying to remember when we first met.
Ah,
So I went back to Matt Yamashita to my filmmaker's emails, and it was November
2019.
26th of 2019 when
Yes.
you reached out to him, he connected us, and that's all she wrote.
Yeah. Yeah.
From, but from then, I mean, your journey has been amazing. And specifically, what I was thinking about that I don't think we've ever talked about is you don't have Parkinson's, and you having been involved as a primary care partner and loving son, and very involved through the Boys of Summers, everything. You've had a lot of focus and a lot of exposure and a lot of time with your dad, and eventually through meeting other people online and stuff. But you don't have Parkinson's. And I was listening to old, not very old, some recent classes, and it's just amazing the sensitivity that you have to us.
Mm.
That it's either that you've seen enough or you understand enough, or there's something about your heart or something. Um, Turn these dingers up. Um, that is really quite extraordinary and quite special. And I don't know. I don't know if you can talk to that at all. You're not going to get off the hook by saying my dad says Parkinson 20 years and I've been paying attention. Sorry, that
Well,
you can't give me that answer.
first off, thank you. That's all very kind. And I mean, in terms of being a compassionate, empathetic person generally, I think that speaks toward the best qualities I have. Um, as we know, we're all complex beings, and we have pieces of ourselves we're less proud of, which we spoke of the other day. Certain shame things or selfish things that come up in certain places. What I've heard and what I find affirming to what you're saying um, is that people have said when they've seen me come off stage or seen me working with a group of people with Parkinson's in this space, either storytelling or improvisation, they say these words: You're doing what you're supposed to be doing." And it almost seems like one of those scenes out of a movie where a voice of God comes through someone else's mouth. And
Feels authentic and
yeah, I mean, that person almost feels like, I didn't even plan on saying that. I just felt compelled to come to you to tell you that. And I mean, that fits with me in terms of, many of my Buddhist studies of, right mind, right work, alignment of the soul and the actions of life in harmony, to create the world within which you wish to live. You want to have the influence you want to have. So if I can use these tools, which include, yeah, communication, a penchant for fun. It's just part of who I am. And I mean, it goes to things like this is why when we were playing with, the book we'll eventually have together, Recovery Time, the My Funny Resume, right? I have this resume that up until 40 years old really looks awfully difficult to define. It starts at that point to get a little more mainstream-ish because I get a master's degree. I've been teaching for a couple of years, and now it's like, okay, whatever he did professionally in those first 20 years of the post-bachelor degree, it's added up to where he can teach it in some way that appears meaningful to the students. And as much as I enjoyed teaching to students, at that level for film and media, it didn't answer the health part of it, right? Which that part became aware really when my parents got that dual diagnosis, right? of
Yeah.
mom getting breast cancer, and 2 weeks later, dad getting Parkinson's, because that just shaped my worldview, right? They went from being stalwarts of health and they're going to live like papa and grandma to their 90s really well, to, oh my gosh, they've got stuff right on their immediate doorstep. And what is health? And what can we do to increase our odds? Because neither of them seem to have asked for or what they got. So, you know, that's where I think it's just been a long summative process of putting these passions and talents and interests and research together, and under an amazing umbrella, two amazing umbrellas, one being improvisation, which is just super welcoming form when it's played at the level I think we play at, right? It is truly an all play. It is a yes and at the highest experience, right? So you can take my funny resume and get in there, and it can have a place to live and be, grown in a great way. And then the other one is Joseph Campbell's mythology. That's having that, which has been with me in pieces since childhood. I've always loved myths and stories, and growing up a Catholic, I mean, I always loved the homily and what when the priest would tell the story of what it meant, Jesus' teachings. I was, wow, to the point of thinking about being a priest at one point, right?
Yeah.
So, that's that piece of me that, like I say, sometimes we joke afterward, I feel like I just came off the pulpit. I mean, I get evangelical about this.
Yeah. Because it's real for you. I
Yeah,
think I
it
have
is.
like 3, 4, or 5 follow-up questions.
Oh,
Let me just name them, and then we can decide how to organize them.
oh,
Buddhism,
mhm.
um, health. That what you just said was. It sounded like you said when your folks got diagnoses of heavy diagnoses within 2 weeks of each other, there was like a sea change inside of you, some fundamental like awareness of health changed
Right,
it.
right.
That's another thing I'd like to come back to. The teaching part of it, Robert, it's very interesting because we met through your being a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, since that was sort of the the heading, under which I met you and stuff, that's probably the lens that I saw you through, and plus was mostly improv to begin with. So I didn't really get how deeply resonant with you being a teacher was until I started being your student and saw. I mean, you didn't you didn't just want to create a classroom experience for us. You didn't want to just introduce us to some stuff. It was real full on invested, emotional. You were one of us. You were there. So, and then the Joseph Campbell piece, I don't know when that first came into your life. I guess you had that opening as a child through church. But anyway, you pick any one of those you want to start with.
Well, I'll work backward. Joseph Campbell, yeah, I mean, mythology and church, certainly. And I mean, no offense to anybody who doesn't see it that way. That's just how I see it. The power of story is wonderful, regardless of where it comes from. I took a mythology class in college that blew open my worldview of mythology in a beautiful way. And where I began to see the stories of Heracles and Gilgamesh align with the stories of Jesus and Buddha. It just helped me see everything on a broader level, and I loved it. And then Joseph Campbell practically, in a few years later at the first grad school stop at UCLA, screenwriting school, through Chris Vogler's work, who took the hero's structure and broke it into a 12-step journey that I now teach. That helped me understand screenwriting, which became, my next 5 to 6 years of my life was just all screenwriting. So yeah, and that, because I had read other screenwriting books, and they just didn't, they were much too, I don't know, straight academic. I don't know exactly how to call it, but they didn't seem to have the heart or the soul that Vogler's work via Joseph Campbell did.
Okay.
So that is that angle. Pardon that for just one second. I'll jump to the Buddhist angle to say that that came about when I turned 30, which is right before my parents' diagnoses with these illnesses. And I left the LA portion of my life saying, I thought maybe I'd done what I come to do in terms of filmmaking. I felt empty in my soul. I had sold myself so deeply into being a filmmaker and chasing the Hollywood dream, and all the elements that were that I had some success, but I just said, I don't know who I am. And, I'm turning 30. I was having a kind of a early midlife or early third life crisis, whatever you want to call it. And escaped to the desert and spent several months living in Las Vegas at that point. Became a card dealer, and I would deal 21 because I was fascinated with the game, and then go home and read. And that's what I did. And I just spent time at the library, going into kind of new age self-help type areas, grabbing any book I could. And amongst them was the Dalai Lama's Art of Happiness, and also the Tao Te Ching, the Life of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda. These books really laid a foundation for an open in my mind and soul about how I want to look at the rest of my life, lay a new foundation, as it were. I've been worshiping Hollywood, which has its perils.
at,
And
at
yeah,
at your own risk, yeah.
I still love the art form, but I didn't love the business side of it, and where I was going with it was feeling extraordinarily hollow. So
So when you
yeah,
went to the library, though, or the bookstore, the section you went to, most people don't do that. Most people
yeah.
don't end
I'll
up
tell
there.
you what, it felt like kind of the old in movie store, in movies joke about, like, I was almost in the adult section. I was over in the new age section. It's like, oh God, it's one of those weirdos who's going to look at that. Oh geez, what is he trying to do? What's wrong with him? Nobody
You
was.
were in disguise, so nobody
No,
knew.
no, yeah, nobody cared.
All right.
But it was oh my gosh, he's
And,
looking at this.
and was it the childhood experience of storytelling and the mythology from the Bible and maybe your college class too that took you to those sections of the library and the
I
bookstore?
think so. These were people who had great life. I felt spiritually empty. So I knew about who the Dalai Lama was. So, okay. And then you start reading bibliographies, and there's like, if you like this, check out this type thing.
Yeah.
So, they led one into the other. And yeah, I mean, that worldview of, what it means to have a meaningful life, all of those things, as felt like an empty vessel. Um, Said, okay, this is what I want to start pouring into that sort of spirit. And it wasn't that long. I mean, I began writing within that time. My third film, my directorial debut, The Long Road Home, which was, one of those coming of age stories, dealt with some of the angst of those feelings. And that summer, while I was filming, it was when Mom and Dad got diagnosed. So that was the
Okay.
collision of all those things.
And you were in Las Vegas by then. You had
Las
moved.
Vegas. I actually had moved. I had two other moves. I moved to Denver briefly, pursuing a relationship that didn't go great, and then moved back to Walnut Creek, right here where I grew up, to hang out with my parents and make this film. Not knowing about their illness at the time, it was kind of a reset. That I wrote this for this area as a homecoming, my directorial debut. I can control some of these elements, and yeah, so that's where that all came about.
So you arrived back in Walnut Creek with some loose sense of Buddhism or
Yeah, I mean, there was ideas of it for sure. I mean, I was very into the Tao Te Ching. I was reading several different translations of it, writing my own, because it's very poetic, waxing philosophical of life, and it rings true to me in many, many ways. And it's largely about the connection of humankind to nature, realigning ourselves in such a way, these series of poems. And, so
yeah.
that was a regular practice.
And then talk to me about teaching.
So teaching formally didn't begin until, I think, substitute teaching a couple of years later. I got hired to teach in LA County when Anna Maria and I were living down there, and that didn't come through, but I already know, and I said, there's something here. In fact, I pursued my teaching degree even in my undergrad days, but when I was going around scouting it, the situation looked so dire. I said, I don't think teaching is really what I want to do. But it was always part of me. Yeah, I do want to do it. I just don't want to be as poorly treated and paid as these poor folk are.
Yeah.
Um, So at any rate, years later, I go back into the substitute angle. It's a side gig. It's something to kind of see, do I like it, whatever. And I ended up not doing it in LA, but then yes, doing it back here in the Bay Area in the old school district I went to, which was, kind of interesting to see how the schools were 15, 20 years later. And
Teaching what? Teaching what?
everything from kindergarten through high school. I took sub gigs, you know, and it was something to basically see, okay, do I like this? How do I like the classroom? Parts of it I loved, parts of it were just painful. So I wasn't sure. I said, I know I want this, but it's not the right alignment.
Okay.
Um, and so that went away again until 2009. And the funny story there, when economic crash, and I had a company that was doing very well, but it was associated with the wedding industry, which, like most things that were considered fringe, budgets went crash. And as Giuseppe is getting ready to be born, and Anna Maria and I, our first son, I've lost my business, and it's very painful. I end up going and taking a flyer on a job as a nude model at an art school, and I was like, okay, this pays. I guess I could do this. And I go into the art school, and the lady who's checking my resume says, "Do you mind if I pass your resume over here to the film department?" I was no idea what you're talking about, but okay. So she brings it into the lady there, and they call me in, and she looks at it. She goes, "You have an impressive film background." I go, "Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've done it. I love it." She goes, "Would you be interested in teaching?" And I went, "Well, sure. I mean, that'd be great. You think I could teach here?" And that's great. We started talking about it. And in comes this lady's name is Lauren, who is the running things. We're having the just hit it off right away. By the way, her favorite book was The Phantom Toll Booth. That came out early somehow.
There you
My
go.
favorite. And then in comes Deanna, the lovely lady who was, kind of the assistant up front, who had begun the screening, and she said, "I'm so sorry to interrupt. I have to tell you, you cannot teach and be a nude model." And I said, "That's okay. I'll just teach."
Let me see.
so, so that
That's
began
adorable. So
that.
there was a gig that never actually materialized.
Yeah, and the teaching thing, that ended up being 5.5 years of teaching at a college level at
In a
a
college
for-profit
level,
school,
different deal than
which
school.
fit much better what I was doing. That was like, okay, this fits better. I mean, A, the pay was better, B, the student, intentionality was better for where I was. The equipment was very good. So and that very quickly led to me going back for my master's degree, realizing if this is going to lead to a professorial type of track, I'm going to need a higher degree than a bachelor's.
Mhm.
And that's where I think things began to track forward. So,
And your folks were diagnosed by then, so you had that health
oh,
um, internal.
yeah, I mean, Dad and I had done Boys of Summer by then, so I mean, I had taken him on his journey. Mom was, a survivor of breast cancer, so there was this idea that, okay, they were stable, they were damaged but stable. And it really wasn't until 2014 that really looked into my dad's second track with Boys of Summer, the second base, that I began to see, oh, he needs more help than I thought. And that means me being a care partner, not even knowing what that word was, but it took me that far down the road to even really start understanding what a care partner was. And that getting really honest about the fact that not just he, but both of them are going to need help at some point. you know by the way, we are ridiculously over time.
I'm so grateful to you for answering these
Oh, well, I mean, it's
questions.
on your heart. You charged at me, and it's like, okay, she needs to know. And so I appreciate you asking. And, you know, if anybody's still listening, hey, thanks. Is there anything we missed? Because I would love for our conversations to be far more back and forth. I don't mind doing this, but I want to make sure that the daily dose is,
Well, just to go back to the fact that you you work with people with Parkinson's.
yeah.
And those of us who work and play with you, it it just feels like you have like this secret inner track to understanding us that I don't, it's just maybe that's where the safe comes in. Maybe that's where people in class are willing to be very vulnerable about, the way their mind's working that day, the way their body's working that day, the way their voice is working, whatever. And there's so much freedom that you give us to, if you can get up out of your chair and you want to do that, that's great. If you don't want to get out of your chair, that's great. There's just this acceptance. It's a lot of who you are as a person, and that's where you started, Robert. It I just it's just very special. It was an interesting thought to me to think today. Man, there's so much, but it's the teaching part. It's just like you are inside of us, and that's just a gift to us as students.
Well, I appreciate that. It's a gift to me that it's valued, that doing something of integrity matters. Because as you know, the deepest concern is always, nobody cares. Yeah, that's nice, but are words that I've heard that I find deeply painful. It's like
Yes,
this
yes,
matters much more than the dismissal you're offering. This is where putting it forward to a group that is undervalued by society at large and perhaps by themselves, that I happen to have a little knowledge about, it's a good use of the skills, right? It allows me to be, part of what I feel is my highest good, a servant leader, you know.
yeah. You've integrated all these different things that you've done are integrated in this current, iteration of who you are, and
Right.
I'm glad I'm along for the ride.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you there, first follower.
Right.
All right. Well, that's our daily dose. Thank you. See you next time.